Cruelty has a very specific face, and for me, that face belongs to my stepmother, Victoria. Some people marry for love, some marry for companionship. But Victoria married my father for one thing, and one thing only: his multi-million-dollar architectural firm. For 10 long years, I watched her play the role of the doting, elegant wife, while secretly waiting like a vulture for my father to drop dead. And when he finally did, passing away suddenly from a massive heart attack, Victoria did not waste a single second grieving. Within 48 hours of his funeral, she threw my entire life into a trash bag, kicked me out of my own childhood home, and handed my executive position at my father's company to her incredibly lazy, spoiled biological son, Leo. To understand the sheer scale of the nightmare Victoria put me through, you need to understand who my father was. He was a brilliant architect who built his firm, Miller Concepts, from the ground up. My biological mother passed away when I was just 7 years old, leaving my father and me completely inseparable. As I grew up, I didn't care about luxury clothes or expensive parties. I cared about my father's legacy. I spent my entire youth studying architectural engineering. I worked 80 hours a week at his firm, starting as a basic intern and working my way up to chief of design. I designed the high-rise commercial buildings that made our company millions. My father always told me that the company belonged to me, and that his wealth was my security. But when I was 16, my father made the biggest mistake of his life. He met Victoria at a charity gala. She was a smooth-talking, high-society woman who always smelled of expensive perfume and wore a mask of pure kindness. She moved into our beautiful 5-bedroom modern mansion within 6 months, bringing along her 12-year-old son, Leo. From the very first week, I knew exactly what Victoria was. Behind my father's back, she would glare at me with eyes full of pure malice. She treated Leo like a golden prince who could do no wrong, funding his expensive lifestyle, while constantly trying to convince my father that I was unstable, rebellious, and didn't appreciate his hard work. Despite her constant psychological manipulation, my father always stood up for me when it came to the business. He knew Leo was a lazy, entitled brat who had failed out of 3 different colleges and spent his days racing luxury sports cars. My father refused to give Leo a single position at the firm, which made Victoria's hidden hatred for us grow into a toxic obsession. Then the tragedy struck. It was a rainy Thursday night when my father collapsed in his home office. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was already gone. My entire world crumbled into absolute darkness in a single second. I lost my mentor, my protector, and my only family. I spent the next 3 days in a complete state of emotional shock, barely able to breathe, let alone think about money or assets, but Victoria was busy. Oh, she was incredibly busy. The morning after the funeral, I was sitting in the mansion's living room, holding a cold cup of coffee, tears streaming down my face. The front door suddenly opened, and Victoria walked in, flanked by 2 large, burly men in matching gray uniforms. She wasn't wearing her black morning clothes anymore. She was dressed in a bright designer outfit, a cold, triumphant smile plastered across her face. Leo walked in behind her, chewing gum loudly and looking around the mansion as if he already owned it. I looked up, wiping my eyes. "Victoria? Who are these men? What is going on?" Victoria didn't answer me directly. She walked over to the fireplace, looked at a beautiful oil painting of my biological mother, and nodded to one of the men. "Take that garbage down and throw it in the dumpster outside," she said casually. I jumped out of my seat, my heart racing with sudden panic. "Do not touch that! What do you think you are doing?" Victoria turned around to face me, her eyes freezing cold. She reached into her expensive leather purse and pulled out a stapled document, tossing it carelessly onto the glass coffee table in front of me. "What I am doing, Maya, is cleaning out my house. This is your father's official, updated will. He signed it exactly 3 weeks ago. It explicitly leaves the mansion, the corporate shares, and all liquid bank accounts entirely to me. You have been completely cut out." I stared at the paper in absolute disbelief. My father would never, under any circumstances, cut me out of his life. He loved me. He built this entire legacy for me. "This is a lie," I shouted, my voice cracking with emotion. "This will is a complete fake. You forced him." Or you forged his signature." Victoria laughed, a sharp, mocking sound that echoed through the high ceilings. "Go ahead and hire a lawyer, sweetie. The signature is perfectly valid, and it has been officially registered with the state probate system. And since this mansion is now legally mine, you are officially trespassing. These two gentlemen are private security. They are here to ensure you leave my property immediately." Before I could even process her words, Leo stepped forward, holding a giant black plastic trash bag. He tossed it at my feet, a disgusting smirk spreading across his face. "We already packed up your bedroom, sis. Well, the things we didn't want to keep anyway. Your expensive design laptops and tablets stay here, since they technically belong to Miller Concepts. Now, get out of my house." I looked at my stepmother, then at Leo, realizing the sheer level of calculation behind this cruelty. They had been planning this the moment my father's heart began to fail. I had no money in my personal account because 95% of my earnings were automatically reinvested into the firm's growth. I had nothing but the clothes on my back and a single trash bag of personal photographs. The security guards moved in closer, their expressions hard. I knew I couldn't fight them physically. I took a deep breath, grabbed the plastic bag, and looked Victoria dead in the eye. "You think you have won, Victoria. You think you can just erase my father's life and take everything we built. But you don't know anything about how this business actually runs." Victoria smirked, adjusting her diamond ring. "I know enough to run you out of town, Maya. Now, walk away before I have these men drag you out by your hair." I walked out of that mansion into the pouring rain, soaking wet with absolutely nowhere to go. I had to spend the night in a cheap, run-down motel on the edge of the city, using the last bit of emergency cash I had in my wallet. As I sat on the edge of that squeaky, uncomfortable bed, watching the rain beat against the dirty window, a dark, cold fire ignited inside my chest. Victoria and Leo thought they had just evicted a helpless, grieving girl. They thought they were going to sit back, enjoy a multi-million-dollar empire, and live like royalty. But they made one fatal mistake. They forgot that while my father owned the name of the company, I wrote the proprietary architectural codes, I held the security encryption keys to the firm's main server, and, most importantly, they had absolutely no idea about the hidden corporate clause my father had created years ago to protect me from this exact scenario. Victoria wanted a war, and she was about to get one that would completely destroy her life. The next morning, I woke up at 5 a.m. to the sound of heavy rain hammering against the old motel roof. I didn't cry. The tears had completely dried up overnight, replaced by a cold, calculating anger that hardened inside my chest. I looked at the black plastic trash bag sitting in the corner of the room, containing nothing but a few childhood photographs and the clothes on my back. Victoria thought she had left me completely powerless, but she had made one monumental mistake. She forgot that wealth is not just about a large house or a fancy title. True power lies in the knowledge, the access, and the code that actually keeps the empire running. I washed my face, put on a simple black hoodie, and walked down the street to a quiet 24-hour internet cafe. I sat in a secluded corner booth, opened a basic laptop, and plugged in an encrypted external hard drive that I always kept in my jacket pocket. Victoria and Leo had confiscated my official corporate laptops, thinking they had completely cut off my access to Miller Concepts. But as the chief of design, I was the one who personally built the company's secure cloud servers and proprietary architectural rendering software. I didn't need their laptops. I had my own private digital backdoors built into the system architecture. With a few keystrokes, I bypassed the company's public firewall and logged directly into the main corporate network. The dashboard loaded, and what I saw made my blood boil. Victoria had already wasted no time. My corporate email account had been completely deactivated. My name had been scrubbed from the executive directory. And right there on the company announcement board was a giant banner that read, "Welcome our new CEO, Victoria Miller, and our new chief of design, Leo Vance Leo, a guy who couldn't even read a basic blueprint, was now the chief of design for a multi-million-dollar firm." It was an absolute joke. But as I scrolled deeper into the corporate email traffic, I found the real reason behind their sudden urgency. Miller Concepts was currently in the final stages of closing a massive $50 million contract with Vanguard Holdings, the biggest commercial real estate developer in the state. My father and I had spent the last 2 years designing a revolutionary, eco-friendly luxury skyscraper for them. Vanguard was scheduled to sign the final contract in exactly 3 days at our corporate headquarters. If the contract went through, Victoria and Leo would receive a massive $10 million upfront payout. That was the money they were banking on to fund their new lavish lifestyle. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen, a dark smile spreading across my face. They thought they were going to use my designs, my hard work, and my sweat to secure a multi-million-dollar fortune while leaving me to starve in a cheap motel. They had absolutely no idea that they were walking straight into a legal minefield. I closed the laptop, packed up my hard drive, and called the one person in this city who truly loved my father, Mr. Arthur Harrison. Arthur was my father's lifelong personal attorney, his closest friend, and the original co-founder of the firm. Victoria had completely bypassed him during the probate process, using a shady, corrupt lawyer she had hired from a high-society country club to push through her suspicious updated will. An hour later, I met Arthur at a quiet, secluded diner on the edge of town. When he saw me sitting there in a damp hoodie, looking completely exhausted, his eyes filled with absolute rage and deep sorrow. He slammed his fist onto the table and told me that he had been trying to contact me for days. But Victoria's lawyers had blocked his access to the house and threatened him with a restraining order. He told me that the updated will Victoria produced was a complete abomination, and that my father would never have signed it willingly. "I know it's a fake, Arthur," I said, my voice completely calm and steady. "But fighting a forged will in court will take 2 or 3 years of expensive legal battles. I don't have that kind of time, and I don't have that kind of money right now. Victoria has frozen all my corporate accounts. I need to strike back now, and I need to strike hard." Arthur looked at me, a sudden gleam of respect and understanding passing through his eyes. He reached into his leather briefcase, pulled out a thick, sealed manila envelope, and slid it across the table toward me. "Your father was a brilliant man, Maya," Arthur whispered, leaning in close. He knew exactly what Victoria was capable of. 5 years ago, when he realized how greedy she was becoming, he came to my office in secret. We created a legal firewall that completely supersedes any will, any probate court, and any corporate board. I broke the wax seal and opened the folder. As my eyes scanned the legal documents inside, my heart began to race. It was a secret, ironclad corporate trust fund agreement, executed and registered under a private, anonymous offshore entity named Phoenix Holdings. Arthur explained the genius of my father's plan. The intellectual property rights, the custom architectural rendering software, and all the digital blueprints for every single active project were not actually owned by Miller Concepts. They were legally owned by the Phoenix Trust. Miller Concepts was merely leasing the rights to use those designs, and according to the ironclad terms of the lease, the agreement would instantly terminate under 2 conditions: either upon the founder's death, or if Maya Miller was ever terminated from her executive position without a unanimous vote from the original co-founders. Since my father had passed away, and Victoria had illegally evicted me, the lease had officially expired the exact second I was kicked out of the mansion. This meant that Miller Concepts no longer had any legal right to use a single blueprint, a single line of software code, or a single design for any of their clients. Without those designs, the company was nothing but an empty shell with a mountain of debt. But that wasn't even the best part. Arthur pointed to the final page of the document. The Phoenix Trust also contained an emergency corporate reserve account, containing exactly $5 million in liquid cash, completely hidden from the standard company audits, and the sole executioner of that trust, with absolute power over the money and the intellectual property, was me. I looked up at Arthur, a wave of pure relief and triumph washing over me. "Victoria and Leo have no idea this trust exists, do they?" None at all. Arthur smiled grimly. They think they own everything because of that forged will. They don't realize they own absolutely nothing. I closed the folder, my mind working at 1,000,000 miles an hour. I could have sent a cease and desist letter to the company right then and there, freezing their operations instantly. But that would be too easy. Victoria and Leo wouldn't suffer enough. I wanted them to feel the exact same terror and public humiliation that they had inflicted on me. Arthur, I said, my eyes narrowing, we are going to let them proceed with the Vanguard Holdings meeting. Let Victoria and Leo stand in that boardroom in front of the city's biggest billionaires. Let them sign that $50 million contract using my designs. Because the exact second they sign their names on that dotted line, they will be committing massive multi-million-dollar corporate fraud against a federal developer. And that is when we pull the plug. The next afternoon, as I was preparing my strategy, my phone buzzed. It was a text message from Leo. It read, "Hey sis, we are clearing out your old office desk today. Come down to the corporate headquarters tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. to collect your trash and sign your official termination papers. Don't be late. We have a very important meeting with Vanguard right after, and we don't want a homeless girl ruining the vibe." I stared at the message, a cold, dangerous smile spreading across my face. He wanted me to come to the office to humiliate me in front of the entire staff. He wanted to watch me beg for my final paycheck. I typed back a simple 2-word response. I'll be there. I stood up, walked over to the motel mirror, and looked at myself. The broken, grieving girl from 2 days ago was completely gone. Tomorrow, I was going to walk into that glass tower, not as a victim, but as the executioner of their greed. They thought they were hosting a celebration for their new empire. But they had no idea they had just invited me to their own corporate funeral. Pichel Partka Akiri Shabda. They thought they were hosting a celebration for their new empire, but they had no idea they had just invited me to their own corporate funeral. Part 3 Mein Ab Headquarters ka High Voltage Drama or Badla Shuru Honen Jarahai. Apis Text Kobina Kisi Badlavke, Direct Copy Kark Voiceover Kalia Use Kar Saktahain. R Skirp 2, Part 3. Copy and paste directly for voiceover. At exactly 9:45 the next morning, I walked through the sliding glass doors of Miller Concepts headquarters. I wasn't wearing my usual designer business suits. I wore a simple black trench coat, dark sunglasses, and carried a small leather folder under my arm. The receptionist, a girl I had known for 5 years, looked at me with a mixture of pity and embarrassment. She whispered, a quiet hello, her eyes darting toward the main glass elevators. Word traveled fast in this building. Everyone already knew that the founder's daughter had been stripped of her title, kicked out of her home, and replaced by her useless stepbrother. I took the elevator up to the penthouse floor. When the doors chimed open, I walked straight toward my old office. But I didn't even make it to the door. Standing right outside, surrounded by 3 large cardboard boxes filled with my personal sketches and design awards, was Leo. He was wearing an incredibly expensive, ill-fitting tailored suit, holding a gold pen, and talking loudly to 2 of our junior architects. When he saw me walking down the hallway, a smug, arrogant grin spread across his face. He clapped his hands together mockingly. Look who finally decided to show up. The prodigal daughter returns to collect her trash. The junior architects looked down at the floor, completely uncomfortable, and quickly walked away. I stood there, keeping my face completely blank, showing absolutely no emotion. I am here for my things, Leo, and to sign whatever papers you need. Oh, absolutely, Leo sneered, kicking one of the cardboard boxes toward me with his leather shoe. But first, we need to make it official. My mother is waiting for you in the main boardroom. We have the termination and severance release forms ready. You sign them, you take your boxes, and you get out of our building before the executives from Vanguard Holdings arrive. We don't want a bitter, unemployed girl making a scene in front of $50 million clients. I nodded slowly, playing the part of the defeated, broken victim perfectly. Lead the way, Leo. He turned around, laughing under his breath, and walked down the hall toward the grand boardroom. I followed him, my heart beating with a cold, steady rhythm. He thought he was leading me to my execution. He had absolutely no idea he was walking me straight into my command center. When we entered the boardroom, Victoria was sitting at the head of the massive mahogany table. She looked completely regal, sipping sparkling water, surrounded by the company's upper management and legal team. On the massive projector screen behind her was a giant digital rendering of my eco-skyscraper design, with the words "Designed by Leo Vance, Chief of Design" stamped right across the bottom. Seeing my 2 years of sleepless nights and architectural genius stolen so shamelessly made my blood turn to ice, but I forced myself to remain completely calm. Victoria looked up at me, her eyes narrowing behind her designer glasses. She didn't offer me a seat. She simply slid a 3-page document across the table. "Sign on the last page, Maya," Victoria said, her voice dripping with artificial politeness. "It states that you are voluntarily resigning from your position, waiving your right to sue the company, and accepting a one-time severance check of $20,000. Consider it a final act of charity from me." I walked over to the table, picked up the pen, and looked at the document. This termination paper was the final piece of the puzzle. By officially firing me and forcing me out of my executive role without a unanimous vote from the co-founders, Victoria had legally triggered the immediate self-destruction clause of the Hidden Phoenix Trust. She was literally forcing me to activate my own trap. I looked up at Victoria, letting a fake tear well up in my eye to keep up the act. "Is this really how you are going to treat my father's legacy? You are destroying everything he built." Leo laughed loudly from the corner of the room. "Dad's legacy is in safe hands, sis. My hands. Now stop whining and sign the paper. The Vanguard executives are downstairs in the lobby right now. We don't have time for your drama." With a trembling hand, I leaned down and signed my name at the bottom of the page. Victoria instantly snatched the paper back, checking the signature with an expression of pure, greedy triumph. "Excellent. Now, Leo, call security and have them escort Miss Miller out through the back exit." But before Leo could even reach for the office phone, the double doors of the boardroom swung wide open. The secretary walked in, her face completely pale, followed by 4 men in high-end dark navy suits. Leading the group was a tall, imposing man with sharp gray eyes and an aura of absolute authority. It was Marcus Vanguard himself, the billionaire CEO of Vanguard Holdings. Victoria's face instantly lit up. She stood up from her chair, smoothing down her designer dress, and walked over to greet him with an extended hand. "Mr. Vanguard, welcome to Miller Concepts. We are absolutely thrilled to have you here. We have the final $50 million contracts printed and ready for your signature. And right here is my brilliant son, Leo, who personally designed the entire skyscraper structure you see on the screen." Marcus Vanguard completely ignored her extended hand. His sharp eyes scanned the room, bypassing Victoria, bypassing Leo, until they locked directly onto me, standing in the corner in my black trench coat. A heavy, suffocating silence filled the room. Victoria's smile froze on her face. She looked back and forth between the billionaire and me, complete confusion taking over her expression. "Mr. Vanguard? Is something wrong?" Marcus Vanguard stepped past her, walked straight over to me, and gave a respectful nod. "Hello, Maya. I received your encrypted file last night. My legal team has been reviewing it for the last 12 hours. Is everything ready?" I reached into my trench coat, pulled out my smartphone, and looked directly at my stepmother and my entitled stepbrother. The mask of the broken, grieving girl completely vanished from my face. I smiled, a cold, dangerous, lethal smile. "Yes, Mr. Vanguard," I said, my voice echoing with absolute confidence through the quiet room. "Everything is perfectly ready. I am just about to show them how a real architectural system operates." I unlocked my phone, opened my custom server application, and hovered my thumb over a bright red button labeled "Terminate Network Lease." Victoria stepped forward, her voice rising in a sudden panic. "What is the meaning of this, Mr. Vanguard? This girl has been fired. She is completely unstable. Security, remove her right now." "Nobody is touching her, Victoria," a loud, booming voice interrupted from the doorway. Everyone turned around. Walking into the boardroom flanked by 2 federal marshals, was Mr. Arthur Harrison, holding a massive, leather-bound legal folder containing the original, ironclad documents of the Phoenix Trust. "Victoria Miller," Arthur said, his voice cold as steel. "As the legal representative of the Phoenix Trust, I am here to officially notify you that Miller Concepts has just lost all legal rights to every single design, patent, blueprint, and software system in this building. You are currently attempting to sell stolen intellectual property to Vanguard Holdings, and my client, Maya Miller, is about to shut your entire empire down." Before Victoria or her high-priced lawyers could even utter a single word, I pressed my thumb down onto my phone screen. Instantly, the giant projector screen behind Victoria went completely black. The corporate lights flickered violently. Down the hallway, loud alarms began to beep as the main architectural servers automatically locked down, wiping every single active blueprint and design file from the company's local computers. In less than 1 second, I had completely hollowed out their multi-million-dollar company, leaving them with nothing but empty desks and a massive $50 million legal nightmare. The boardroom erupted into complete, unmitigated chaos. The high-definition rendering of my skyscraper design vanished from the screen, replaced by a giant flashing red warning message. "Access denied. Lease terminated." Leo dropped his expensive gold pen, his mouth hanging open like a fish, staring at the black screen in absolute horror. Victoria's face transformed from a smug mask of greedy triumph into a twisted mask of pure panic. She ran toward the tech console, frantically slapping her hands against the keyboard, screaming at her IT staff through the internal intercom to fix the system. But it was completely useless. My encrypted code had wiped every single byte of architectural data from their local network. Years of my hard work, my blueprints, and my designs were completely safe inside my private Phoenix Trust server. To Miller Concepts, they were gone forever. Victoria spun around, her eyes wild with rage, pointing a shaking finger at me. "What did you do?" "You broke into our systems. This is illegal. I will have you thrown in prison for life." "Actually, Victoria," Marcus Vanguard interrupted, his deep voice slicing through her hysterical screaming with absolute authority, "the only person going to prison today is you." Marcus reached into his tailored suit jacket, pulled out a document, and tossed it carelessly onto the mahogany table. "Team does not sign contracts with amateurs, and we certainly don't do business with thieves. Maya Miller contacted me last night. She proved to me that she owns the intellectual property rights to the skyscraper design. More importantly, she showed me the evidence of how you illegally terminated her to steal her work. You tried to sell my corporation a multi-million-dollar project using stolen designs. My legal team has already filed a massive federal fraud lawsuit against Miller Concepts. We are suing you for $50 million in damages." Victoria staggered backward, her knees buckling as she collapsed heavily into her leather chair. Her corporate lawyers immediately huddled around her, whispering frantically, their faces filled with pure terror. They knew the company was completely finished. Without my designs, they had zero revenue, and with a $50 million lawsuit from a billionaire, the firm was facing immediate catastrophic bankruptcy. But I wasn't done yet. I stepped forward, looking down at my stepmother and my entitled stepbrother. "You thought you were clever, Victoria," I said, my voice ice-cold and echoing through the silent boardroom. "You thought you could forge an updated will, kick me out of my childhood home with a plastic trash bag, and hand my father's empire to your lazy, useless son. But you forgot that a business doesn't run on a piece of stolen paper. It runs on intellect. I built this entire infrastructure. I hold the keys, and now I am taking it all back." Arthur Harrison, my father's loyal attorney, stepped forward and handed a fresh set of legal injunctions to Victoria's terrified lawyers. Because Maya Miller is the sole executor of the Phoenix Trust, which holds a $5 million liquid cash reserve, we have officially funded an expedited emergency investigation into your suspicious probate documents. The police are already inspecting the notary signature on that updated will. We have forensic proof that your signature was forged while my father was incapacitated in his final hours. Two federal marshals stepped forward, their expressions completely hardened. They walked over to Leo, who was shaking violently, and demanded he step away from the executive desk. Within 48 hours, the full weight of the legal system crashed down on Victoria and Leo like a tidal wave. The forensic handwriting experts easily proved that my father's signature on the updated will was a complete, clumsy forgery orchestrated by Victoria and a corrupt attorney. The probate court immediately revoked the document, declaring it entirely null and void. Because the will was fraudulent, the law recognized me as the sole, legitimate heir to my father's entire estate. The ultimate satisfaction came exactly 1 week later. The weather was bright and sunny, as I pulled up to my childhood mansion in a sleek, black executive vehicle. I wasn't wearing a cheap motel hoodie anymore. I was dressed in a flawless, custom-tailored designer business suit. Standing on the manicured front lawn surrounded by their own matching black plastic trash bags were Victoria and Leo. A team of county sheriffs stood by the front door, ensuring they did not touch a single piece of furniture inside. Victoria's expensive designer clothes were gone, replaced by cheap, ordinary garments. Her luxury SUV had been repossessed by the bank just that morning to cover her skyrocketing legal debts. Leo was sitting on one of his trash bags, staring at his shoes, completely stripped of his unearned arrogance. Victoria looked up at me as I walked up the driveway, her eyes red from crying, her voice cracking with desperation. "Maya, please, you can't do this to us. We have nowhere to go. All our personal bank accounts have been frozen by the fraud investigation. We are completely broke. You are leaving us completely homeless." I stopped right in front of her, looking down at her with absolute indifference. I remembered the pouring rain, the cheap, rundown motel, and the sheer cruelty in her voice when she told the security guards to drag me out by my hair just days ago. "I am not doing anything to you, Victoria," I replied calmly, adjusting my sunglasses. "You did this to yourself the moment you decided to disrespect my father's memory and rob his daughter. You wanted my house, you wanted my company, and you wanted my life. Now, you can experience exactly what it feels like to have nothing." I turned away from her, ignoring her hysterical sobbing, and walked up the steps into my father's beautiful mansion. I walked straight over to the fireplace, picked up the oil painting of my biological mother from the floor where they had tossed it, and hung it proudly back on the wall where it belonged. Today, Miller Concepts is completely thriving. I merged the firm with Marcus Vanguard's Development Corporation under the name Phoenix Architecture, and we are currently building the most advanced skyscraper in the city. As for Victoria and Leo, they learned the most brutal lesson of their lives. Victoria is currently working a low-wage, entry-level retail job just to afford a tiny, cramped room in a dangerous part of town, while Leo's criminal record for corporate fraud ensures he will never step foot inside a professional office building again. They tried to play a dangerous game of greed against the very person who built the board. In the end, they didn't just lose the game, they lost absolutely everything.